Hello, my name is Brother Sean, and as you can see from the outfit, I'm an enclosed lay monastic, a Franciscan monk. Though I am a Catholic Christian, I embrace all faiths, and that was the message from St. Francis of Assisi back in April 2008. And that was to set up the Teo community of interspiritual Franciscans, the fourth order of men and women willing to commit their hearts to a loving God and associate with the marginalized in our society. In other words, to live among them, to work with them, and to pray with them. The theme of this recording is, in what way do we dishonor the divine in our life? It's quite a challenge, but as we're into the beginning of a new year, sometimes it's good to be able to do a pre-spring clean in our soul and reflect on our relationship with God, with ourselves, with each other. For in the commandments of God, the one that really, well, there are two that really touch my heart. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and next, thy neighbour as thyself. So how do we dishonor God? Well, firstly, I believe by withholding the company of heaven from guiding our hearts to do what the divine is asking of us, by not making time to nurture our spiritual journey. We have 3 rooms: mind, body and spirit. We educate our mind, we read, we search for knowledge, we keep abreast with news and events in the world. And our body, we feed it hopefully good food, nutritious food that's wholesome and beneficial for good health. But what about the spiritual room? That room is often denied and forsaken. And it's not down to monks and nuns like me. It's down to every child of God to nourish their soul, their higher self, their spirit room. By not self-healing, we get the warning signals that all isn't well, but we refuse to heal ourselves. We would rather reach out and heal others, as was my case as a senior nurse. We're very good at giving advice, but we're not very good at heeding that advice. Another idea that comes to me is by willfully neglecting our spiritual life, by putting on hold our spiritual practices, that all-important time spent with God in silence, in prayer, taking time out to listen to that inner voice of spirit that does speak to us lovingly, gently, and compassionately. Another way of dishonoring the divine within is by dishonoring who we are as a child of God, by cutting ourselves off from the life stream of love that flows from a loving Father, Mother God. And we do that in so many ways, through pretense, deceit, arrogance, pride, ego, by putting our love of God on the back burner, by searching dreams that will never materialize because they're more about ego than they are about discerning the will of God. Another way is by planting seeds of despair in your own heart by convincing yourself that you are totally unworthy of God's love. And I share this in love because one such client really touched my heart middle of last year in 2012, where I had an email and it was so horrific. A beautiful spiritual child of God who got in with the wrong crowd, very talented as a musician, as a singer, but because she got involved with the wrong crowd who were experimenting with drugs, she convinced herself that God couldn't forgive her. Her mind took control of her destiny, but her mind was full of negativity, and she was listening to those inner voices that were destructive, and they alienated her heart, leaving her so wounded that an entity had come in, and that entity was not of God. It was a dark negative energy that took on a persona of its own and dictated a negative lifestyle. And prayer was not an effort, it was a chore. And trying to reach this beautiful soul by sharing with them about forgiveness and the dynamics of forgiveness, and that God had forgiven her, it was like water off a duck's back. She wasn't listening. She was hearing, but not listening. By planting seeds of despair in others, instead of acknowledging their gifting, we discredit them through our moaning, our grumblings, and by convincing others that they are useless, and by talking about others as if they were a second-class citizen and not an equal with them. And you find that in communities and in groups more so, as I have found in the Teo community, where members form a clique, and that clique becomes a law unto themselves, and they're not really listening to the voice of God. They're listening to their own ego because they have an agenda to plant seeds of recklessness. And it does alienate the community. Same in a family. If one member is willfully negligent or destructive, that has an impact on the whole status quo of the family. Spiritual pretense, lying to our hearts, deceiving ourselves, by engaging in idle gossip, by slandering another's good name. For every child of God has a good name because they've been blessed by God. And people today thrive on gossip. I found it in our own community where members would ring up and be asking, oh, who said what, when did they say it, where did they say it, and what happened. They're more interested in the gossip than they are in the actual safeguarding of truth. By living an unlived life, that dishonors God, and it dishonors the divine within us, for we are not reclaiming the divine within us. We are not acknowledging a God of joy and peace and love, and that is so tragic. By withholding our truth from God, by not sharing with God how we're feeling and where we're at in our journey, again we're back to the pretense of wearing a different mask to different people. By not being ourselves, by not being true to our heart. That is such anathema, and that is a disease a spiritual disease that eats away at the very fabric of that loving relationship between God and you and me. Another way of dishonoring God is by abusing God's gifts. You know within your being that God has given every child of God gifts to glorify God. For example, music. Some are talented with playing musical instruments. I'm not. I'm tone deaf. Some have a beautiful voice and won't use it. Some are brilliant at arts and crafts. And when they make something, they put it on the back burner. They can't receive the praise that others give them on the talents that they have. It's like a false arrogance, a pride. When people praise me for the things I do, like the cakes we make here in the monastery and share with others in need, I just send the praise back to God, because the gift that is being given is not mine, it's from God. So by withholding that truth and denying ourselves, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. Another way of dishonoring the divine is by wallowing in our own self-pity, by wallowing in victimhood, and by allowing the victim within to become a third person. For that third person is real, and that third person does dictate strong negative voices that rape the soul. And it's worth keeping an eye on that. Greed, materialism, and a hedonistic lifestyle is alien to the spiritual life. Why do I share that? I share that because today we do live in a beautiful world. Many say, oh, it's an awful world. It's not. The world is a beautiful world. Earth is a beautiful gift from God through Gaia to our heart. You just have to come up here to the South Lakes where we live, and the vista is just breathtaking. The serenity, the peace, the animal kingdom. And now we're coming soon out of winter into spring, and the whole area will be alive with the bleating of lambs. It's music for the soul. But those who are on a quest or a search for wealth, for greed and power, are reckless souls. They're unhappy souls, because they fill the void in their life with materialism, where it does not bring you happiness. And I know from being a teenager, you'd save your pennies to buy. I remember in the 60s, early 60s, before I became a monk, I had this thing about the Beatles. I just loved the Beatles. I had to have a Beatle hairdo, the Beatle jacket and the Beatle shoes with the pointy toes. And then the Chelsea boots came in. You'll do anything. You'll do paper rounds. Oh, you'd even sell your granny just to have the money to keep with the fashion. And that's how it is today. Many people are turned on more by status, by their wealth, and what a miserable existence they have. Because materialism does not bring peace. It does not bring happiness. It might bring transitory happiness, where you have that feel-good factor and you go somewhere important like a dinner engagement or the theatre and you're wearing your latest whatever, but it passes. Unlike the spiritual life, if you're willing to invest in your spiritual path, you will find that the riches far outweigh the effort. So one must be on one's guard and not close the door to love. And that door can be closed, and it can remain closed in a lot of people's lives. I've seen it. I've seen it over many, many years of nursing, 38 years in fact. I've seen it as a pastoral counsellor, as a therapist, as a teacher in ascenic energy medicine. Clients who come here disheveled, broken in spirit, where they've been abused as a child, where they find it very difficult to move on, and suddenly, when we perform the anointing of the feet, bringing in the Christ energy, the cosmic Christ, and allowing the divine feminine bring back that balance of male-female energy and leave them resting in that love. It's an amazing experience. It's very humbling to be able to stand back and watch what the power of prayer can do for another. So to honor the divine in our life is one of the key objectives of living on this earth. And we do that by reclaiming who we are as a child of God. But in reclaiming, in honoring, we can equally dishonor through willful neglect, through stubbornness of heart, through denial of truth, and by not living a fun, joy-filled life, which is the life that is promised to us once we surrender our heart to the Supreme. But many today see that word surrender as being an ugly word, being a fractious word, because they see surrender as giving away your power. It's the opposite. It's actually receiving more power from God, a power that reawakens within you your true divinity and dignity. If you need help, there are lots of wonderful spiritual teachers around, and if you need my help, then all you have to do is email me. But you and I have a duty of care to our mind, our body, and our spirit. And whilst we live to a 24-hour clock, it's not easy to give 8 hours to the mind, 8 hours to the body, and 8 hours to the spirit. So we mix and match. But you must, for the survival of your soul, for spiritual wellness and wholeness, to be nourished and maintained, you need to make time each day, not each month or each year, each day, may only be 10-15 minutes, to sit in the presence of love, to sit in the presence of God, close down to those inner voices in the head and open the heart to hear that still voice that affirms you as a beloved of God. If you are willing to do that, then you will not be accused of dishonoring the divine by God. And instead of getting embroiled in idle gossip and slandering another, you'll actually be going out of your way to praise them and exonerate and face evil head on. And you will meet individuals, even in a monastery, oh yes, who are so insecure, so mean and so miserable, they become so wrapped up in the me culture of selfishness that they forget that they share their life with God with others. And it takes a person of real integrity, real courage, to be willing to share that love with others. But of course, when you share love, not physical love, but when you share true spiritual love, you run the risk of being rejected, as I have been many times, as I have rejected others many times. But now, as I grow older, I'm beginning to realize the error of my ways, and others are my teacher through their constructive criticism, not destructive criticism, for that dishonors God. We're given one day at a time. And as St. Benedict said to his novices at Monte Cassino all those hundreds of years ago, a spoonful of honey attracts more flies than a barrel of vinegar. I leave you with that and thank you for your patience. May God bless you and keep you safe and well. Namaste.